The second universe. The real anomalies that shouldn't exist. In 2016, scientists detected something they couldn't explain. A signal. Not from Earth. Not from any known star. A repeating burst of radio energy coming from billions of light years away. It flashed, then vanished, then came back again, perfectly timed. Too structured to be random, too powerful to ignore. They called it a fast radio burst. But here's the problem. Some of these signals repeat in patterns that don't make sense. Not chaotic, not predictable either. Almost like something is interfering or overlapping. And that's just the beginning, because something else happened that made physicists deeply uncomfortable. In Antarctica, a NASA experiment detected particles flying up out of the Earth, not down from space, up, as if they had passed through the entire planet without interacting. That shouldn't be possible, at least not in our understanding of physics. So here's the question. What kind of universe allows things like this to happen? And the deeper one, are these just strange events or tiny cracks in reality itself? Because if even one of these anomalies is real, then something is very wrong with the way we think the universe works, and something much bigger might be hiding behind it. Now here's where things get even stranger. In quantum physics experiments, scientists observe particles behaving as if they knew they were being watched. Not metaphorically, literally. When unobserved, they act like waves, spreading out, existing in many places at once. But the moment you measure them, they snap into a single position, like they suddenly decide where to be. And this isn't theory. It's been tested over and over again, and it keeps happening. But no one really knows why. So let's slow down for a second, because what I'm about to say might sound simple, but it changes everything. If a particle can exist in multiple states, and only becomes real when observed, then what happens to the other possibilities? Where do they go? Do they disappear? Or do they continue somewhere else? Right around now, I want to pause for just a moment. If this kind of mystery pulls you in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Because what we're uncovering tonight doesn't just challenge science, it challenges reality itself. And the deeper we go, the harder it becomes to come back to a simple view of the world. Now imagine this. You're playing a video game. At a critical moment, you have two choices. Go left or go right. In a normal game, you pick one. The other path disappears. But what if, instead, both paths continue? Two versions of the game. Two different timelines. Running side by side, you only experience one, but the other one still exists. That idea might sound like science fiction. But in physics, there's a real theory that suggests exactly this. It's called the many worlds interpretation, and it proposes something radical. Every time a quantum event has multiple outcomes, the universe doesn't choose. It splits, quietly, instantly, into separate realities, each one containing a different outcome. At around the 2-minute mark, here's where the story takes a sharp turn. If the universe really splits like this, then right now, there isn't just one version of reality. There are countless, layered, stacked, invisible to each other. And in some of them, things didn't go the same way. Some are almost identical to ours. Some are wildly different. And somewhere, there could be a universe where those strange radio signals weren't just anomalies, but messages or interference from something on the other side. Let's take this one step further, because this isn't just about particles anymore. It's about you. Every decision you've ever made, every moment where you hesitated, every what if that crossed your mind. According to this idea, those paths didn't vanish. They continued. In another universe, there's a version of you who made a different choice 5 minutes ago. Another version who chose a completely different life years ago, and neither of you knows the other exists. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If all versions exist, which one is you? The one listening right now? Or just one branch, among many? And if every possible outcome happens somewhere, are your choices actually meaningful? Or are they just one of countless variations? Hold that thought. Don't answer it yet, because we're opening a loop here, and we won't close it until much later. At around 4 minutes into this journey, scientists try to explain this idea in a more grounded way. They say, think of reality like a deck of cards. When you shuffle it, there are countless possible arrangements. Now imagine instead of choosing one arrangement, every possible shuffle happens, each in its own universe, at the same time. You only see one, but the others are just as real. It sounds abstract, but mathematically, it works. In fact, some equations in quantum mechanics behave as if all possibilities exist, and that's the strange part. The math doesn't break. Reality does. Now let's go back to those anomalies, the radio bursts, the particles from Antarctica, the strange behavior of quantum experiments. Individually, they're just mysteries, but together, they start to form a pattern that suggests something subtle, something we're not seeing directly, because what if these aren't isolated phenomena? What if they're symptoms of something deeper? Around 6 minutes in, we hit a new question. If parallel universes exist, where are they? Are they far away? Beyond the edge of the observable universe? Or are they right here, occupying the same space, but separated by something we can't perceive? Another dimension, another layer of reality, like two radio stations broadcasting on different frequencies. In the same room, you only hear one, but the other is still there. And here's the unsettling possibility. What if, just for a fraction of a second, those frequencies overlap? What if the anomalies we observe are not random, but brief moments where another universe brushes against ours? Too fast to detect clearly, too faint to measure directly, but enough to leave a trace, a glitch, a signal, a particle going the wrong way. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that changes everything. We might not be completely separated from these other universes. There may be ways, theoretical, fragile, and incredibly rare, where information leaks across. Not people, not objects, but information, patterns, energy. And if that's true, then the biggest question isn't just whether another universe exists. It's whether we've already seen evidence of it and simply didn't recognize it. So now we're holding on to 3 open questions. Is there a second universe running alongside ours? Can anything ever cross between them? And if other versions of you exist, what makes this one real? We're not answering them yet. Not fully. Because each of those questions leads deeper, into territory where physics starts to blur into philosophy, and where reality becomes less certain than we'd like. In the next part, we're going to go beyond parallel universes. We're going to explore something even more unsettling. The idea that universes might be created constantly, like bubbles forming in an infinite cosmic ocean. And if that's true, then our universe might not just have a neighbor. It might be one of countless others, floating, expanding, and occasionally touching. But before we go there, hold on to this feeling. That quiet sense that reality might not be as solid as it seems. Because if even one of these anomalies is real, then somewhere, just beyond what we can perceive, another universe might already be closer than we think. Part 2. The Universe Factory. Are we living inside a cosmic bubble? There's a quiet idea, hiding inside modern physics. And once you see it, it's very hard to unsee. Our universe might not be unique. It might not even be special. It might be one bubble in an endless cosmic ocean. And here's the unsettling part. New universes might be forming right now. Let's begin with something we know is real. Our universe is expanding. Galaxies are drifting apart. Space itself is stretching in all directions. But when scientists measured this expansion, they found something shocking. It's not slowing down. It's speeding up, faster and faster, over time. As if something invisible is pushing the universe outward. They called it dark energy. But that name is just a placeholder. Because we don't actually know what it is. We only know what it does. And what it does is deeply strange. Now here's where the mystery grows. If the universe is expanding faster and faster, then go back in time. Everything gets closer together, hotter, denser, until we reach the beginning, the Big Bang. But here's the problem. The Big Bang shouldn't have worked. At least, not the way we see it. Because the universe is too uniform, too smooth, too evenly spread out. Regions of space that should never have interacted somehow look almost identical. It's like finding two strangers on opposite sides of the earth, wearing identical clothes, speaking the same language, sharing the same memories. It shouldn't happen, unless something connected them in the past. So physicists proposed something bold. Right after the Big Bang, the universe didn't just expand, it exploded outward, faster than the speed of light. For a tiny fraction of a second, space itself stretched at an insane rate. This idea is called cosmic inflation, and it solves a lot of problems. But it introduces a bigger one, because inflation doesn't have to happen just once. In fact, some versions of the theory suggest it never stops. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's where everything changes. What if inflation is still happening? Somewhere else, not here, not in our observable universe, but in regions beyond it. Endless regions, where space keeps expanding, creating new bubbles of reality. Each one, its own universe, its own laws, its own version of physics, its own story. Imagine boiling water. Bubbles form. They grow. They separate. Each bubble is distinct, but all of them exist in the same pot. Now replace water with space-time, and bubbles with universes. That's the idea. A multiverse. Not just parallel timelines, but entirely separate universes. Being created over and over again. And here's the unsettling twist. These universes might not follow the same rules as ours. In one universe, gravity might be stronger. In another, atoms might not form at all. In some, stars never ignite. In others, time itself could behave differently. And somewhere, there might be a universe almost identical to ours. So similar that the only difference is one tiny detail. But here's the question we're not answering yet. If these universes exist, are they completely isolated, or can they interact? We'll come back to that, because the answer is not simple. Now let's connect this idea to something even stranger. Earlier, we talked about quantum choices, particles existing in multiple states, reality branching. Now imagine combining that with an infinite number of bubble universes. You don't just get parallel timelines, you get layers upon layers of reality. Some branching from quantum events, some born from cosmic inflation, different mechanisms, same unsettling conclusion. Reality might not be singular. At around 4 minutes, scientists begin to notice something curious. The laws of physics in our universe seem perfectly tuned. Not just random, not chaotic, but balanced in a very precise way. If gravity were slightly stronger, stars would burn out too quickly. If it were weaker, they might never form. If certain constants changed even a little, matter itself might not exist. So here's the uncomfortable question. Why is the universe so finely tuned for existence? Is it coincidence or something else? One possible answer is simple, but disturbing. Maybe there are countless universes, most of them lifeless, chaotic, unstable, but a few, by pure chance, have the right conditions. And we exist in one of those because we couldn't exist anywhere else. It's like winning a cosmic lottery. Not because the universe was designed for us, but because we're only here, in the rare universe where life is possible. Now pause for a second, because this opens a deeper loop. If there are infinite universes, then everything that can happen does happen. Somewhere. So what does that mean for you? Does it mean there are versions of you in completely different universes? Not just different choices, but different laws of reality? A version of you in a universe where time flows differently, or where space curves in strange ways, or where consciousness itself behaves differently. We're not answering that yet, but hold on to it. At around 6 minutes, a new question emerges. If universes are like bubbles, what happens when they collide? It sounds like science fiction, but some physicists take this idea seriously. If two expanding universes ever touched, even for a moment, it could leave a scar, a faint imprint in the fabric of space. Some scientists have searched for these signs in the cosmic microwave background. The afterglow of the Big Bang, tiny temperature variations, strange patterns. Nothing confirmed yet, but the search continues. Because if even one collision is detected, it would change everything. It would mean we are not alone in existence, not just in terms of life, but in terms of universes. And now we reach the next turning point. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise. If universes can form, if they can expand, if they can even collide, then there may be ways, however unlikely, for information to pass between them, not directly, not like stepping through a door, but through subtle effects, distortions, echoes, patterns that don't belong, and maybe, just maybe, those strange signals we talked about earlier aren't random at all. So now the picture is getting bigger, much bigger. We're no longer asking, is there another universe? We're asking, how many are there? How were they created? And are they truly separate or just hidden? And we're still holding on to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Can anything cross between them? And what makes this version of reality? The one you experience. We're getting closer, but not close enough. Because in the next part, we're going to explore something even more unsettling. The idea that these universes might not just exist independently, they might be connected through dimensions we cannot see, hidden directions beyond length, width, and height. And if that's true, then other universes might not be far away at all. They might be right here, just one dimension, out of reach. And the boundary between them might be thinner than we ever imagined. Part 3. Hidden dimensions. Are other universes right beside you? There's a possibility, even stranger than parallel universes being far away. They might not be far at all. They might be right here, not above you, not below you, but in a direction you cannot see, a direction that doesn't exist in your everyday experience. Let's start with something simple. Imagine a flat world, a 2-dimensional universe, like a sheet of paper. Now imagine tiny creatures living on that sheet. They can move left and right, forward and backward, but they have no concept of up. It doesn't exist for them. Now imagine you, a 3-dimensional being. You can lift something off the paper, disappear it from their world, and place it back somewhere else. To those flat creatures, it would look like magic, or worse, like something impossible. Now here's the unsettling thought. What if we are those flat creatures? What if there are more dimensions? right here, but we simply cannot perceive them. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's where physics takes a strange turn. Some of the most advanced theories suggest that our universe might have more than 3 dimensions of space. Not 4, not 5, but 10, or even 11. Hidden, curled up, so small we can't detect them directly. This idea comes from string theory, a framework that tries to unify everything, gravity, particles, forces, into one consistent picture. But to make the math work, it needs extra dimensions, invisible ones. And here's where it connects to our mystery. If extra dimensions exist, then our entire universe might be like that sheet of paper, a surface, floating inside a higher dimensional space. Physicists sometimes call it a brane, short for membrane, a 3-dimensional world embedded in something bigger. Now pause for a second, because this opens a completely new possibility. If our universe is a brane, then other branes could exist, right next to ours, separated, not by distance, but by dimension, like 2 pages in a book, close, but never touching, unless something goes wrong. At around 4 minutes, here's where the idea becomes unsettling. What if another universe is sitting just a fraction of a dimension away from you, right now? Not billions of light years away, not in some distant bubble, but right here. You just can't reach it. You can't see it. You can't interact with it, because all of your senses are locked into 3 dimensions. Imagine again those flat creatures. If another sheet of paper existed, just above theirs, they would never know. Unless something crossed between the sheets, a particle, a force, a ripple, something that doesn't follow their rules. And that brings us back to the anomalies we talked about earlier. Particles behaving strangely. Signals that don't make sense. Moments where reality seems to glitch. What if some of those are not random? What if they are tiny interactions with something outside our dimension? Now here's a fascinating idea. Gravity might be leaking. Compared to other forces, gravity is incredibly weak. Think about it. A small magnet can lift a paperclip against the pull of the entire Earth. That shouldn't be possible if gravity were as strong as the other forces. So why is it so weak? One hypothesis suggests gravity isn't actually weak. It just spreads out into other dimensions, like sound leaking through walls. We only feel a small part of it. The rest escapes into hidden dimensions, possibly into other universes. At around 6 minutes, we hit another turning point. If forces can leak between dimensions, what else can? Information, energy, even matter? Some theories suggest, under extreme conditions, tiny connections could form, bridges, shortcuts, tunnels through higher dimensions. You might know them as wormholes, but not the kind you see in movies, not stable portals you can walk through, more like fleeting distortions, appearing and disappearing in fractions of a second. And here's the question we're not answering yet. If a connection like that formed, even briefly, what would pass through? Nothing? Random noise? Or something structured? Something intentional? Hold on to that, because we'll come back to it. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that pulls everything together. If other universes exist in hidden dimensions, then they are not just theoretical. They are near. Closer than any galaxy. Closer than any star. Closer than the air around you. But separated by a barrier we don't yet understand. Now let's return to our 3 open questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Now, it doesn't seem so far-fetched. Can anything cross between them? We're starting to see, maybe, under very specific conditions. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is becoming harder to answer. Because if multiple universes exist right next to each other, then reality might not be a single stage. It might be a layered structure. Multiple realities coexisting, unaware of each other. And here's a strange way to think about it. Right now, in the same space you occupy, there could be another world. Different laws, different history, different outcomes, and you would never know. Not because it's far away, but because it's inaccessible. But something still doesn't make sense. If these universes are so close, why don't we see more evidence? Why isn't reality constantly breaking? Why don't things cross over all the time? That's the next mystery. And it leads us deeper. Because in the next part, we're going to explore the limits. What prevents universes from interacting? What keeps them separated? And what would happen if that separation failed? Not briefly, not subtly, but catastrophically. A collision, a merging, a moment where two realities become one. And if that's possible, then the question is no longer, are there other universes? It becomes, what happens when they meet, and whether we would even survive to notice. Part 4. When universes touch, the catastrophe we would never see coming. There is a reason. We don't experience other universes, a barrier. Not a wall you can touch, not a distance you can travel, but something far more fundamental. A separation written into the fabric of reality itself. And if that barrier ever failed, you wouldn't have time to react. You wouldn't even understand what was happening. Because by the time you noticed, everything you know would already be gone. Let's begin with a simple question. If multiple universes exist, what keeps them apart? Why don't they constantly interfere? Why doesn't reality collapse into chaos? The answer, according to modern physics, might be stability. Our universe follows a specific set of rules, constants, forces, relationships between energy and matter, all perfectly balanced, like a delicate structure, standing because every piece is exactly where it needs to be. Now imagine another universe with slightly different rules, not wildly different, just enough. A tiny shift in the strength of forces, a slight variation in physical constants. On their own, both universes are stable, but together, they might not be compatible. Think of it like two different operating systems. Each works perfectly on its own, but try to merge them, and everything crashes. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the unsettling realization. If two universes ever touched, even slightly, the laws of physics could conflict. Not gradually, not gently, instantly. One set of rules would override the other, or both would break. And in that moment, matter itself could become unstable. Atoms could fail to hold together. Energy could behave unpredictably. The structure of reality could unravel. But here's the strange part. From your perspective, you might never notice, because the process would be faster than perception, faster than thought, faster than light crossing your body. One moment, everything exists. The next, it doesn't. No explosion, no warning, just absence. Now let's go deeper, because physicists have already discovered something similar, not between universes, but within our own. It's called vacuum decay, and it's one of the most terrifying possibilities in physics. Our universe exists in a certain state, a configuration of energy. But what if this state is not the most stable one? What if it's just temporary, like a ball resting in a shallow dip when a deeper valley exists nearby? If something were to push it, even slightly, it could fall into that deeper state, a more stable configuration. But the transition would be catastrophic. At around 4 minutes, here's the disturbing twist. If vacuum decay happened, it would create a bubble, not a universe bubble, but a bubble of new physics. Inside it, the laws of nature would be different, completely different, and that bubble would expand at the speed of light, consuming everything, rewriting reality as it goes. And here's the worst part. You wouldn't see it coming, because nothing travels faster than light. By the time the bubble reached you, it would already be too late. No signal, no warning, just instant transformation. Now pause, because this connects directly to our multiverse idea. What if a collision between universes looks exactly like vacuum decay? What if the bubble is actually another universe, overlapping with ours? At around 6 minutes, a new question emerges. Has this ever happened before? Could it happen again? Some scientists believe if multiple universes exist, collisions might be rare, but not impossible. And if they happen, they could leave traces. Subtle ones. Patterns in cosmic radiation. Anomalies in the structure of space. Nothing definitive yet, but hints. Always hints. Now let's return to something even stranger. Earlier, we talked about hidden dimensions. Brains. Universes floating side by side. In some theories, these brains are not static. They move, they drift, and occasionally, they collide. Imagine two massive sheets floating in a higher dimensional space. Most of the time, they never touch. But over vast time scales, movement happens. And if they collide, the energy released could be enormous. Some physicists have even suggested that our Big Bang might have been the result of such a collision. Not the beginning of everything, but the aftermath of two universes meeting. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that changes everything. If our universe was born from a collision, then collisions are not just possible. They are part of the story, which means they could happen again. Now let's step back, because the picture is becoming clearer. We have multiple ideas, all pointing in a similar direction. Parallel universes from quantum events, bubble universes from cosmic inflation, hidden universes in extra dimensions, and now, the possibility that universes can interact, even collide. So we return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Now, it seems almost likely. Can anything cross between them? Under extreme conditions? Yes. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is starting to feel less solid. Because if universes can collide, if reality can change, if the laws of physics are not absolute, then what we experience might just be one temporary state, one configuration, in a much larger system. And here's the most unsettling thought so far. If a universe collision happened tomorrow, you wouldn't know. Not because it's hidden, but because you wouldn't exist long enough to realize it. But something still doesn't fit. If these events are possible, why haven't we seen clear evidence? Why does the universe appear so stable, so consistent? That leads us to the next mystery, and it's even deeper. Because in the next part, we're going to explore the limits of observation itself. What can we actually detect? What lies beyond the observable universe? And whether the reason we don't see other universes is not because they're rare, but because we are fundamentally unable to perceive them. And if that's true, then the biggest barrier between us and another universe is not space, not time, but the limits of reality itself. Part 5. The Edge of Reality. Why you can never see the other universe. There is a boundary, not a wall, not a line drawn in space, but a limit, built into reality itself. And no matter how advanced we become, no matter how powerful our technology gets, we may never cross it. Not because we're not smart enough, but because the universe doesn't allow it. Let's begin with something deceptively simple. Look up at the night sky. Every star you see, every galaxy, every faint glow of light belongs to what scientists call the observable universe, the part of reality we can actually detect. But here's the unsettling truth. That's not the whole universe, not even close. Light takes time to travel. So when you look at distant stars, you're seeing the past. The farther away something is, the older the light you receive. Now imagine looking so far that the light hasn't had enough time to reach you yet. That region exists. You just can't see it. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the shift. There are regions of the universe so far away that their light will never reach us. Not now. Not ever. Because space itself is expanding, stretching faster than light can travel, which means those regions are permanently cut off, not hidden, not invisible, but fundamentally unreachable. Now pause, because this creates a strange realization. There are parts of our own universe that we will never see. No matter how long we wait, no matter how advanced we become, they exist. But for us, they might as well not. And here's where the deeper question begins. If we can't even observe all of our own universe, how could we ever detect another one? At around 4 minutes, we reach a more unsettling idea. What if the reason we don't see other universes is not because they're rare, but because they lie beyond our observable limit? Not in another dimension, not in a different layer, but simply too far away, beyond the cosmic horizon. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast ocean. You can see the horizon in every direction. It looks like a boundary, but it's not. It's just the limit of your vision. Beyond it, the ocean continues, unseen, unreachable. Now apply that idea to the universe. Our observable universe is just our horizon. Beyond it, there could be more space, more galaxies, or something entirely different, another universe. And here's the strange part. We can't prove it, but we also can't rule it out, because by definition, it lies beyond what we can observe. At around 6 minutes, we encounter a deeper limitation. It's not just distance that blocks us, it's information. The universe has a speed limit. The speed of light. Nothing can travel faster, not matter, not energy, not information. This means, even if something extraordinary happened, just beyond our observable boundary, we would never know. No signal could reach us. No evidence could arrive. It would be completely cut off. Now think about that. There could be entire regions of reality, undergoing events we can't imagine, and we would never detect them. Not because they're subtle, but because information cannot cross the boundary. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the unsettling promise. The greatest barrier between us and another universe may not be distance. It may not be dimension. It may be the flow of information itself. Now let's connect this back to our mystery. We've explored multiple possibilities. Parallel universes from quantum events. Bubble universes from cosmic inflation. Hidden universes in extra dimensions. And now, regions beyond our observable horizon. Each one offers a different answer, but they all lead to the same conclusion. Other universes might exist, and we might never be able to see them. So we return again to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Possibly, in more ways than one. Can anything cross between them? Only under extreme and rare conditions. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is still open, and it's getting more complicated. Because if there are limits to observation, then reality is larger than what we can perceive, much larger. And what we call the universe might just be a small window into something far greater. But here's where things become even more unsettling. What if? The limitation isn't just physical? What if it's also cognitive? What if our brains, our senses, are not designed to perceive the full structure of reality? Imagine trying to explain color to someone who has never seen it, or describing depth to a two-dimensional being. There are experiences that simply cannot be understood from a limited perspective. Now apply that idea to us. What if higher dimensions, other universes, or deeper layers of reality are not just invisible, but fundamentally incomprehensible? Not because they are complex, but because our minds are not equipped to process them. That means, even if evidence were right in front of us, we might not recognize it. We might interpret it incorrectly, or ignore it entirely. And that leads to a new question, a deeper one. If another universe left traces in ours, would we even know what we're looking at? Or would it appear as random noise, an anomaly, something we dismiss? Because history shows us something important. Many scientific discoveries were once ignored, misunderstood, or explained away until someone looked closer. So now we stand at a strange edge, not just the edge of the universe, but the edge of understanding, where observation fails, where intuition breaks, where reality becomes uncertain. And yet, we keep asking the question, is there something more? In the next part, we're going to take a different approach. Instead of asking where other universes are, we're going to ask how we might detect them. What signals would we look for? What experiments could reveal them? And whether we may have already seen hints without realizing it. Because if there's even a small chance that evidence exists, then the story changes. From speculation to discovery. And the moment that happens, everything we think we know about reality will never be the same again. Part 6. Signals from the other side. Have we already seen another universe? What if the evidence is already here? Not hidden in some distant galaxy, not locked inside an unreachable dimension, but buried in data we've already collected, signals we've already detected, anomalies we've already recorded, and quietly set aside. Because science doesn't always discover the truth immediately. Sometimes it notices something strange and doesn't know what to do with it. So it labels it, files it away, waits. Let's go back to one of those moments. A signal, repeating from deep space. Fast radio bursts. For years. They made no sense. Short, intense, gone in milliseconds. Some repeat, some don't. Most come from billions of light years away. But a few behave differently. Patterns that don't quite fit. Timings that feel structured. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to raise a question. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's where things become uncomfortable. What if some of these signals are not natural? Not artificial in the way we imagine, like messages from aliens, but something else, something unintended, like interference, crosstalk between realities. Think about 2 radio stations, broadcasting at nearly the same frequency. Most of the time, you hear one clearly, but occasionally you get static, a faint overlap, a distortion. Now imagine universes instead of radio signals, each one operating on its own frequency of reality, usually separate, but not perfectly. And here's the unsettling idea. Those strange signals might not be coming from within our universe. They might be leaking in. Now let's move to something even more precise, the cosmic microwave background. The oldest light in the universe, a faint glow, left over from the Big Bang. It's incredibly uniform, smooth, predictable, but not perfectly. There are tiny fluctuations, Small variations in temperature, most of them are explained. Natural, expected. But a few stand out. Cold spots, unusual alignments, patterns that don't fully match our models. At around 4 minutes, here's the question that unsettles cosmologists. What if those anomalies are not random? What if they are scars, evidence of something interacting with our universe long ago? Some researchers have proposed that a collision with another universe could leave exactly that kind of imprint. Not a dramatic tear, not a visible hole, but a subtle disturbance, frozen into the earliest light we can observe. It's not confirmed, it's not widely accepted, but it hasn't been ruled out either. And that's the uncomfortable space science sometimes lives in. Not proven. Not disproven, just possible. Now let's go even deeper, because there's another place where reality behaves strangely. Particle accelerators, machines designed to smash particles together at incredible speeds to reveal the fundamental structure of matter. And sometimes the results don't match expectations perfectly, most of the time. It's experimental uncertainty, measurement limits, complex interactions. But occasionally, there are tiny discrepancies, energy that doesn't quite add up, results that don't fully align. At around 6 minutes, here's the deeper question. What if some of that missing energy isn't missing at all? What if it's going somewhere else, leaking into another dimension, another universe? Some theories predict exactly this, that under high energy conditions, particles could momentarily access extra dimensions, not travel through them, but interact, transfer energy, disappear from our measurable space, and reappear elsewhere. It would look like a loss, an imbalance, a small violation of expectation. Nothing dramatic, but measurable. And that leads to a fascinating possibility. We might already be detecting interactions without realizing what they are. Now pause, because this opens another loop. If evidence exists, why haven't we confirmed it? Why isn't this headline news? Why isn't everyone talking about it? Because science requires certainty. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. And right now, we don't have enough. We have hints, patterns, anomalies, but no definitive proof. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise. We are getting closer. New instruments, more precise measurements, better data. Each year, our ability to observe the universe improves. And with it, our ability to detect the unexpected. Now let's return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? We're starting to see possible hints. Can anything cross between them? Maybe not matter, but energy, information, perhaps. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is still waiting, but it's becoming more urgent. Because if interactions are possible, even at the smallest level, then the boundary between universes is not absolute. It's permeable, fragile. Under the right conditions, something can pass through. And here's the most unsettling thought so far. What if it already has? Not in a dramatic way, not something obvious, but subtle, quiet, a signal, a fluctuation, a tiny piece of information, crossing from one reality into another. And we noticed it, recorded it, analyzed it, and then dismissed it because it didn't fit our models. But what if the models are incomplete? What if reality is bigger than the framework we use to describe it? That's where we are now, standing at the edge of discovery, looking at data. That almost makes sense, but not quite. In the next part, we're going to explore something even more personal. If other universes exist, and if interactions are possible, then what does that mean for you? Not abstractly, not theoretically, but directly. Could there be another version of you in another universe? And if so, are they truly separate or somehow connected? Because the answer to that question might change the way you see yourself forever. Part 7. Another you. Are there other versions of yourself living different lives? There's a version of you who didn't click this video. A version who made a different decision this morning. A version whose life slowly drifted in another direction. Not dramatically, just one small change at a time. And now, they are somewhere else, living a life you will never experience. This isn't philosophy, at least not entirely. It comes from the same physics we've been exploring, and it leads to one of the most personal questions in all of science. If parallel universes exist, do other versions of you exist too? Let's begin with something simple. Every moment of your life is shaped by choices. Some are big, most are small. So small, you barely notice them. Turning left instead of right, saying something or staying silent, waiting or acting. Each decision feels singular, final, like the path you didn't choose, simply disappears. But what if it doesn't? At around 2 minutes into this part, here's where the idea becomes unsettling. In the many worlds interpretation, every possible outcome actually happens. Not one, all of them, each in its own branch of reality. Imagine standing at a crossroads. In one universe, you go left. In another, you go right. In one, you hesitate. In another, you don't. Each version continues, unaware of the others. Now stretch that idea across your entire life. Every decision, every moment, every possibility, branching again and again, creating a vast network of realities, each one containing a version of you. But here's the deeper question. Are those versions really you? Or are they something else? At around 4 minutes, we hit a philosophical edge. What defines you? Your body? Your memories? Your consciousness? If another version of you shares your past, up to a certain point, but then diverges, are they still you? Or do they become someone new? Imagine copying a file. At first, both copies are identical, but as soon as you start editing one, they become different. Which one is the original? Which one is real? The answer feels obvious. But in a multiverse, it's not. Because there may be no original, just versions. Now let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about identity, it's about experience. Right now, you are aware of one timeline, one sequence of events, one version of reality. But if other versions of you exist, they are having their own experiences. Just as real, just as vivid, just as meaningful. At around 6 minutes, here's the unsettling realization. From their perspective, they are the real one, not you. Each version of you feels like the center of their own reality. Each one has memories, thoughts, a sense of self, and none of them can access the others. So what makes your experience special? Why are you this version and not another? We're not answering that yet, because this is one of the deepest loops in our story, and it doesn't close easily. Now let's connect this to something even stranger, quantum entanglement. Two particles linked in such a way that what happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter the distance. It's real, tested, verified, and still not fully understood. Some interpretations suggest this connection goes deeper than space, deeper than distance, almost like the particles are not truly separate, but part of a single system. Now imagine extending that idea, not to particles, but to versions of you, different branches, different realities? Could there be a deeper connection? Not direct communication, not shared thoughts, but something subtle, a correlation, a link. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that changes the tone of this question. What if your decisions are not completely independent? What if they are part of a larger structure, spanning multiple realities? It sounds impossible, but think about this. In quantum mechanics, outcomes are not completely random. They follow probabilities, patterns, structures. What if your life is shaped by something similar? Not determined, but influenced by a broader set of possibilities. Now pause, because this leads to a strange idea. What if intuition, those moments where you feel something is right or wrong, are not just random feelings? What if they are echoes, not from the future, not from the past, but from other versions of you experiencing different outcomes? We're not claiming that's true, but it's a question worth holding. Because if multiple versions of you exist, then your life is not just one path. It's one thread in a much larger pattern. And here's the unsettling part. Some of those threads lead to better outcomes. Some to worse ones. Some versions of you might have avoided mistakes. Others might have made bigger ones. And you will never know. So now we return again to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Yes, and possibly countless versions of reality. Can anything cross between them? Not directly, but maybe something subtle. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is now deeply personal, because it's no longer just about physics. It's about identity, choice, existence itself. And we're not done, because in the next part, we're going to explore something even more unsettling. If multiple versions of you exist, is there any way to prove it? Any experiment, any observation, any test that could reveal the presence of another you? Or is this one of those truths that exists but can never be confirmed? Because if it can be tested, then the implications are enormous. Not just for science, but for how you understand your own life and every choice you make from this moment forward. Part 8. Can we prove it? The experiments that might reveal another universe. What if this isn't just theory? What if there's a way to test it? Not by traveling to another universe, not by opening a portal, but by looking very carefully at reality itself. Because science doesn't accept ideas easily, it demands proof, evidence, something measurable, repeatable, something that doesn't just feel true, but is true. And that's where this story becomes even more fascinating. Let's start with a simple question. If other universes exist, how would we know? What would we look for? What kind of signal would prove something beyond our reality is interacting with us? At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the first clue. Interference. Not visual, not obvious, but subtle patterns, hidden in measurements. Think about waves. When 2 waves overlap, they create interference patterns, peaks and valleys, constructive and destructive combinations. Now imagine reality itself as a kind of wave. Not solid, not fixed, but probabilistic. If another universe somehow overlaps with ours, even slightly, it might create interference. Not something you can see with your eyes, but something you could detect in precise experiments. And this brings us back to quantum mechanics, the double-slit experiment, one of the most famous experiments in physics. Fire a single particle through 2 slits. You might expect it to go through one or the other, but it doesn't. It behaves like a wave, passing through both slits at once, interfering with itself, creating a pattern. Now here's the strange part. Even when particles are fired one at a time, the pattern still emerges, as if each particle is somehow aware of all possible paths. At around 4 minutes, here's the unsettling extension. What if that interference is not just within our universe? What if it involves other realities? Some physicists have suggested that the interference pattern might be evidence of interactions between parallel worlds, each possibility existing in its own branch, and the pattern we see is the combined result. It's not proven, but the math allows it, and that's enough to keep the question alive. Now let's go further, because there are actual experiments being designed to test this idea. One approach involves quantum computing. These machines use quantum states to perform calculations. They don't just process one outcome. They explore many possibilities at once. Some researchers believe that quantum computers might be tapping into something deeper, not just parallel calculations, but parallel realities. At around 6 minutes, here's the bold question. When a quantum computer solves a problem, where is the work being done? All in our universe, or distributed across many? It sounds like science fiction, but the results are real. Quantum computers can perform certain tasks in ways classical computers cannot, as if they have access to more than one path. Now imagine this. If parallel universes exist, and quantum systems can access multiple states, then those systems might be interacting with other branches of reality. Not directly, not consciously, but functionally. And that opens a fascinating possibility. We might not need to travel to another universe to prove it exists. We might already be interacting with it through quantum processes. Now pause, because this leads to another loop. If interaction is possible, can it be controlled? Can we design an experiment that forces a measurable effect? Scientists are trying, looking for deviations, tiny differences between predicted and observed outcomes, something that can't be explained within a single universe model. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise. The first real evidence of another universe might not be dramatic. It might not be obvious. It could be a small discrepancy, a tiny mismatch, a result that shouldn't exist, but does. And when that happens, everything changes. Because it would mean our universe is not closed, not isolated, not alone. Now let's return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? We're getting closer to testing it. Can anything cross between them, possibly through quantum interactions? And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question is still open. But now, it might become testable. Because if experiments can reveal multiple realities, then the idea of one true reality starts to break down. And here's the most exciting part. We are living in the moment where this question might be answered. Not centuries from now, not in some distant future, but within our lifetime. New experiments, more precise instruments, better theories. Each step bringing us closer. And yet, there's still a problem, a deeper one. Even if we prove other universes exist, what does that actually mean for science, for reality, for you? Because in the next part, we're going to explore the consequences. Not just the physics, but the implications. What it would mean to live in a universe that is not unique, not central, not alone. And whether that realization would change everything or nothing at all. Part 9. If it's true, what does it change? Let's assume just for a moment, that it's real. Not theory, not speculation, but confirmed. There are other universes, other realities, other versions of existence running alongside ours. What changes? At first, it might feel like everything changes. But then, something strange happens. You wake up the next day, you drink your coffee, you go to work, you talk to people, and nothing feels different. The sky is still there, the ground is still solid, life continues. So here's the real question. If the multiverse is true, does it actually matter? At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the first shift. For science, it changes everything. Because it means our universe is not the whole story, not the final layer, just one piece of a much larger structure. It would reshape physics, cosmology, our understanding of reality itself. Because instead of asking, why does the universe behave this way, we would ask, which universe are we in, and why this one? The laws of physics might not be universal, they might be local, specific to our region of reality, like the climate in one country compared to another. Now pause, because this leads to a deeper implication. If the laws of physics can vary, then what we call fundamental might not be fundamental at all, just one version among many. At around 4 minutes, here's where it becomes personal. If every possible outcome exists somewhere, then your life is not a single path. It's one of many. That might sound comforting. Every mistake, every regret exists differently somewhere else. In another universe, you made a better choice, avoided the problem, took the opportunity. But it also raises a darker possibility. In another universe, things went worse. Much worse. And those versions of you are just as real. So which one matters? The successful one? The struggling one? Or the one you are right now? We're not answering that yet, because this question goes deeper than science. It touches meaning, purpose, identity. At around 6 minutes, here's the unsettling realization. If all possibilities exist, then nothing is truly unique. Nothing is truly one of a kind. Your achievements? They happen elsewhere. Your failures? They happen elsewhere too. Every version of every outcome exists. So does that make your choices meaningless or more meaningful? Think about it. If only one version of reality exists, then your choices define everything. They are final, irreplaceable. But if many versions exist, then your choices define only your path, your experience, your story. And that might be the key. Because even in a multiverse, you only live one life. You only experience one sequence of events. So maybe meaning doesn't come from uniqueness. Maybe it comes from experience, from perspective, from being the one who lives through it. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that reframes everything. Even if there are countless versions of you, this is the only one you will ever be. And that makes it matter, not less, but more. Because no matter how many universes exist, you are here, in this one, experiencing this reality, making these choices. Now let's return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? It's no longer just a scientific curiosity. It's a shift in perspective. Can anything cross between them? Maybe in subtle ways. Maybe in ways we don't fully understand yet. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question may not have a scientific answer. It may be something deeper, something tied to consciousness itself. Because here's the final twist of this part. What if reality is not just physical? What if it's also experiential, defined not just by what exists, but by what is observed, what is felt, what is lived. And if that's true, then even in an infinite multiverse, your experience is still singular. Now pause, because we're about to go even deeper. In the next part, we're going to explore the ultimate question, not just whether other universes exist, but why. Why does reality allow this? Why does the universe, or multiverse, exist at all? Because if we can answer that, even partially, we move beyond science into something more fundamental, the origin of everything, and whether the multiverse is the final answer, or just the next layer of an even deeper mystery. Part 10. Why does it exist? The question even the multiverse can't answer. There is one question that sits beneath all the others, quieter, deeper, more unsettling. Why does any of this exist at all? Not just our universe, not just multiple universes, but existence itself. Because even if we accept everything we've explored, parallel worlds, bubble universes, hidden dimensions, even an infinite multiverse, we haven't answered the most fundamental question. We've only moved it. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the shift. Imagine you discover there are countless universes, each with different laws, different structures, different realities. That explains variety. It explains possibility. It even explains why this universe looks the way it does. But it doesn't explain why there are any universes at all. Why is there something instead of nothing? Now pause, because this is where science starts to reach its limits. Physics can describe how things behave, how universes expand, how particles interact, how space and time evolve. But when you ask why the system exists in the first place, the answers become less clear. At around 4 minutes, some scientists propose a bold idea. Maybe nothing is unstable. Maybe the absence of everything cannot persist. In quantum physics, even empty space isn't truly empty. It fluctuates. Tiny particles appear and disappear. Energy shifts. So perhaps the default state of reality is not nothing, but something. And universes are just large-scale expressions of that underlying instability. In this view, the multiverse isn't created. It simply happens. But that leads to another question. Why does that underlying system exist? Why do the rules of quantum physics exist? Why does anything fluctuate at all? We've pushed the question back, but not answered it. Now let's go deeper, because some thinkers suggest something even more radical. At around 6 minutes, here's the unsettling idea. What if reality doesn't need a reason? What if the question why is something our minds impose, but the universe doesn't follow? Imagine asking why a mathematical truth exists. Why does 2 plus 2 equal 4? It just does. It doesn't need a cause. It doesn't need a reason. It's simply true. Some physicists suggest the multiverse might be like that. A structure, a system, that exists because it is logically consistent. No beginning, no cause, no external explanation. Just existence. Now pause again, because this is where things become difficult to grasp. If the multiverse exists necessarily, then there is no outside to explain it. No deeper layer, no final answer. And that leads to a strange conclusion. The search for an ultimate explanation might not have an endpoint. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that shifts everything. The deeper we go, the more reality feels like a question, without a final answer. And yet, we keep asking. Now let's return to our 3 questions one more time. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Very possibly. Yes. Can anything cross between them in rare, subtle ways? Perhaps. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? That question may not be answerable through physics alone, because it touches something beyond equations, beyond measurements. It touches consciousness. Why are you aware of this moment? Why this perspective? Why this sequence of experiences, even in a single universe? That question is mysterious. In a multiverse, it becomes even deeper. Because if countless versions of reality exist, then consciousness might be the thing that selects or experiences one path among many. But how and why? We're not answering that yet, because this is the deepest loop of all. Now step back for a moment. Look at the journey so far. We started with anomalies, strange signals, unexplained behavior. We moved through quantum physics, parallel worlds. We explored cosmic inflation, bubble universes. We considered hidden dimensions, collisions, interactions. We questioned identity, choice, meaning. And now, we've reached the edge, not just of the universe, but of explanation itself. And here's the strange part. Even without a final answer, the question still matters. Because asking it changes how you see everything. It shifts your perspective, from certainty to curiosity, from simplicity to wonder. And maybe that's the point. In the next part, we're going to explore the final layer of this journey. Not the physics, not the theory, but the experience. What it means to live in a reality that might not be unique. And whether that realization should make you feel small or something much bigger, because the answer might not be what you expect. Part 11. Does it make you smaller or more important than ever? If there are countless universes, countless versions of reality, countless versions of you, then at first, it feels like you matter less. You are not unique, not singular, not the only one. You are one version among many. And that thought can feel uncomfortable. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the emotional shift. For centuries, we believed we were at the center of everything. The Earth was the center of the universe. Then we discovered it orbits the sun. Then we realized the sun is just one star among billions in a galaxy. Then we learned our galaxy is just one among billions more. Each discovery made us feel smaller, less central, less important. And now, the multiverse suggests something even more radical. Our entire universe might not be special, just one bubble in an endless cosmic sea. So it's natural to ask if everything exists somewhere, if every possibility happens, if every version of you is real, then what makes this one matter? We're not answering that immediately, because there's another side to this story. At around 4 minutes, here's the reversal. What if the multiverse doesn't make you smaller, but larger? Think about it. If countless versions of reality exist, then existence itself is not rare. It's abundant, overflowing. But your experience is still singular. You are the only version of you that you will ever be aware of. No matter how many other versions exist, you will never feel their thoughts, never see through their eyes, never live their lives. So from your perspective, your experience is still unique. Not because it's the only one that exists, but because it's the only one you will ever have. Now pause, because this changes the meaning of importance. Importance doesn't come from being the only one. It comes from being the one that experiences. At around 6 minutes, here's the deeper realization. Imagine a vast library, infinite books, each one telling a different story. Some stories are similar, some are completely different. Now imagine you can only read one book, one story. Does the existence of other books make your story meaningless? Or does it make it more valuable? Because it's the only one you will ever read? That's the shift. The multiverse doesn't erase meaning, it reframes it. Meaning is no longer about exclusivity. It's about perspective. Your life matters because you are the one living it. Now let's go even deeper, because this connects to something we touched on earlier. Choice. If all possibilities exist, then every decision you could make is realized somewhere. So what does it mean to choose? At around 7.5 minutes, here's the unsettling promise. Your choices may not change the multiverse, but they define your path through it. Think of it like this. Imagine a massive network of roads. Every possible route exists. But you still choose which one to walk. And that choice determines what you experience, what you see, what you become. Even if other versions of you are walking different paths, you are still responsible for this one. Now return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Yes, and maybe countless more. Can anything cross between them? Possibly in subtle ways. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? Now we have a different kind of answer. It's not about physics, not entirely. It's about perspective, consciousness, experience. You are here because this is the path you are on. And no matter how many other paths exist, this one is yours. Now here's the final twist of this part. What if the multiverse doesn't make life less meaningful, but more? Because every moment, every choice, every experience is not just one of many. It's the one you get. And that makes it irreplaceable. Not because it's the only one in existence, but because it's the only one you will ever live. So maybe the question isn't, do other universes exist? Maybe the question is, what will you do in this one? And that's where we're going next. Because in the final parts of this journey, we're going to bring everything together. Not just the science, not just the theory, but the implications, the meaning, the perspective, and whether understanding the multiverse should change the way you live, or simply deepen the way you see. Part 12. Living in a multiverse. Should it change the way you live? There's a quiet shift that happens when you truly absorb this idea. Not just understand it, but feel it. If reality is bigger than we thought, if countless possibilities exist, if your life is one path among many, then how should you live? At first, it feels like nothing changes. You still wake up, still make choices, still move forward through time. But underneath that, something subtle begins to move. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the first shift. Fear starts to change. Think about it. So many of our fears come from uncertainty. What if I fail? What if I choose wrong? What if this decision ruins everything? But in a multiverse, every outcome exists somewhere. Failure exists. Success exists. Every version of every possibility of being is already real in some branch of reality. So what does that do to fear? It doesn't erase it, but it reshapes it. Because the question is no longer, what if I fail? It becomes, what will I experience if I choose this path? And that's different. At around 4 minutes, here's the deeper realization. You are not choosing outcomes. You are choosing experiences. The multiverse suggests all outcomes exist, but you still decide which one you live through. It's like standing in front of a massive library again. Infinite books, infinite stories. You cannot read them all, but you can choose one. And once you choose, you begin to live that story. Page by page, moment by moment. Now pause, because this changes responsibility. If all outcomes exist, it might seem like nothing matters, like your choices don't change the bigger picture. But they change your picture. They determine your path, your experience, your version of reality. And that makes them deeply important. At around 6 minutes, here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't control everything. You never could. There are forces beyond you, randomness, chance, events you didn't choose. And in a multiverse, that becomes even clearer. Because some versions of you will face things you never do, and you will face things they never experience. So control was always limited. But choice? Choice is still yours. Not the outcome, but the direction. And that might be the most honest way to see life. You don't control the entire story, but you choose how you move through it. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that ties everything together. The multiverse doesn't take away meaning. It removes the illusion of control and replaces it with something more real. Participation. You are not controlling reality. You are participating in it. And your choices determine how you participate. Now let's go even deeper, because there's another shift happening here. Regret. Regret comes from imagining a different outcome, a different version of events. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. But in a multiverse, those versions exist. The version of you who made the right choice is out there, but you are not that version. And that can feel painful, but it can also be freeing, because it reminds you that your life is not about finding the perfect path. It's about living this one. At around 9 minutes into this journey, a new question begins to form. If all paths exist, then what makes a path meaningful? Is it success? Is it happiness? Is it impact? Or is it something simpler? Experience, growth, awareness. Because even in a multiverse, those things are not duplicated. Your growth happens here, in this version. Your awareness exists in this moment. And that gives your life a kind of depth that isn't reduced by the existence of others. Now return to our 3 questions one more time. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Very likely. Yes. Can anything cross between them? Perhaps, in subtle and rare ways. And what makes this version of reality the one you experience? Now we can say something new. It's not just physics, it's engagement. You are here because this is the reality you're experiencing, and that experience is shaped by your attention, your choices, your awareness. Now here's the final turn of this part. What if the multiverse is not something to prove, but something to reflect on? Not just a scientific idea, but a perspective, a way of seeing reality as larger, more open, more complex than we imagined. And instead of making life feel smaller, it invites you to live more fully. Because if reality is vast, if possibilities are endless, then the most meaningful thing you can do is not to chase every path, but to be fully present in the one you are on. And that brings us to the final stretch of this journey. Because in the next part, we're going to explore one last question. Not about physics, not about universes, but about awareness itself, what it means to experience reality, and whether consciousness is just a byproduct of the universe, or something more fundamental. Because if consciousness plays a deeper role, then the story we've been telling might not just be about universes. It might be about the observer, who makes them real. Part 13. The Observer. Does consciousness create reality? There is one piece of this puzzle we've been circling around but never fully stepping into. Not space, not time, not universes, but you, the observer. Because everything we've talked about so far, parallel worlds, quantum possibilities, multiple realities, all of it depends on something very strange. Observation. At around 2 minutes into this part, here's where things become deeply unsettling. In quantum physics, a system can exist in multiple states at once. A particle can be in many positions, many possibilities. But the moment it is observed, it chooses one state, one outcome. This is called the collapse of the wave function. Before observation, reality is a range of possibilities. After observation, it becomes a single experience. Now pause, because this raises a question that is still debated today. What counts as an observation? Is it a measuring device, a detector, or does it require consciousness? At around 4 minutes, here's the deeper mystery. If observation plays a role in shaping reality, then consciousness might not just be a passive observer. It might be part of the process. Some interpretations suggest that reality doesn't fully resolve until it is observed. Not created from nothing, but selected from a range of possibilities. And if that's true, then every moment you experience is not just happening to you. It is being realized. Now let's connect this to the multiverse. If all possible outcomes exist, then reality is constantly branching, but you only experience one branch. Why this one? What determines the path you are aware of? We've asked this question before, but now it has a new dimension. What if consciousness is the thing that navigates those branches? Not consciously, not intentionally, but fundamentally. At around 6 minutes, here's the unsettling idea. You are not moving through a fixed reality. You are moving through a field of possibilities. And your awareness is what defines the path you experience. Think of it like this. Imagine a vast landscape, infinite paths. All of them exist, but a spotlight illuminates only one path at a time. That spotlight is your consciousness. Now here's the deeper question. Does the spotlight just reveal the path, or does it somehow influence it? We don't have a clear answer. But the question itself changes everything. Because if consciousness plays a role, then reality is not just external. It is participatory. You are not just inside the universe. You are part of the process that defines how it is experienced. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that reframes the entire journey. The multiverse might not just be a collection of universes. It might be a collection of possibilities, waiting to be experienced. And consciousness is what turns possibility into reality. Now pause again, because this is where science begins to blur into something else. Philosophy, and even deeper questions. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? Is it just a product of the brain? Or is it something more fundamental? Some scientists argue that consciousness emerges from complex systems. Neurons interacting, signals firing, patterns forming. But others suggest something more radical. That consciousness is not created by the brain, but accessed through it, like a receiver, tuning into a deeper layer of reality. If that's true, then consciousness might exist, independently of any single universe, not bound to one reality, but connected to many. We're not claiming that's the answer, but it's a possibility that fits surprisingly well with the idea of a multiverse. Now return to our three questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Yes, and possibly many more. Can anything cross between them? Perhaps not physically, but maybe experientially. And what makes this version of reality? The one you experience. Now we have a different kind of answer. It might be consciousness itself, not choosing in a deliberate way, but aligning with one path, among countless possibilities. Now here's the final turn of this part. If consciousness is part of reality's structure, then the universe is not just something you observe. It is something you participate in. Not in a mystical sense, but in a fundamental one. Your awareness is part of the system. And that means the story we've been telling is not just about universes, it's about the relationship between reality and the one who experiences it. And that leads us to the final parts of this journey. Because in the next section, we're going to bring everything together. Not just the science, not just the ideas, but the full picture. And whether the multiverse is the final layer of reality, or just the beginning of something even deeper. Part 14, the full picture. Is the multiverse the final answer, or just another layer? Let's step back for a moment, all the way back. We began with anomalies, signals that shouldn't exist, particles behaving in ways that don't make sense. We followed those clues into quantum physics, into branching realities, then deeper into cosmic inflation, bubble universes, then sideways into hidden dimensions, worlds sitting right beside us, unseen. We explored collisions, interactions, the limits of observation. We questioned identity, choice, meaning. And finally, we reached the observer, consciousness itself. Now here we are, standing at the edge of everything we've explored. And the question returns. Is this it? Is the multiverse the final layer of reality? Or is it just another step? At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the unsettling shift. Every time science finds an answer, it opens a deeper question. We thought Earth was the center. It wasn't. We thought our galaxy was everything. It wasn't. We thought our universe was all that exists. Now we're not so sure. So what happens if we confirm the multiverse? Does that finally explain everything? Or does it just push the mystery one level deeper? Now pause, because this pattern matters. Every final answer has never been final. It has always been a doorway. At around 4 minutes, here's the deeper realization. The multiverse might explain how different realities exist, but it doesn't explain why the multiverse itself exists. What created it? What defines its rules? Why does it allow infinite possibilities? We asked these questions in the last part, and we didn't fully answer them. Because maybe they don't have simple answers. Or maybe we're asking the wrong kind of question. Now let's go further, because there's another possibility. What if the multiverse is not the foundation, but a structure within something even larger? At around 6 minutes, here's the idea that pushes everything further. What if reality is layered? Not just one universe, not just many universes, but levels. Each level containing structures that seem complete until you look deeper. Think of it like a simulation. Inside a video game, characters experience a world, rules, physics, boundaries. But that world exists inside a larger system. Now imagine that system exists inside another, and another, layer upon layer. We're not saying reality is a simulation, but the idea illustrates something important. What feels like a complete reality might be part of something bigger, and the multiverse might be one of those layers. Not the base, not the end, just another level of structure. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that reframes everything we've explored. There may not be a final layer. Reality might not have a bottom. It might be endless. Not just in space, not just in number of universes, but in depth. Every explanation leading to another question, every answer opening another door. Now pause again, because this changes the goal. If there is no final answer, then the purpose of exploration shifts. It's no longer about reaching the end. It's about understanding each layer as deeply as we can. Now return to our 3 questions. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Yes, and likely many more. Can anything cross between them, possibly under rare and subtle conditions? And what makes this version of reality, the one you experience? Now we see something new. That question might not have a single answer, because reality itself might not be a single system. It might be a hierarchy, a network, a structure too vast to fully comprehend. And you exist within it, not at the center, not at the edge, but somewhere inside, experiencing one layer of something much larger. Now here's the final turn of this part. What if the multiverse is not the destination, but the beginning? Not the end of the story, but the moment we realize how big the story really is. Because once you accept that reality may be far larger than you imagined, you stop looking for simple answers, and you start asking better questions. And that's where we're going next. Because in the final parts of this journey, we're not just going to explore what reality is, we're going to explore how to live, knowing that it might be infinite, and whether that realization should leave you feeling lost or more connected than ever before. Part 15. If reality is infinite, how do you live without getting lost? There's a moment when everything we've explored starts to feel overwhelming. Infinite universes, infinite possibilities, infinite versions of reality. No clear edge, no final layer, no single simple answer. And in that moment, a quiet question appears. How do you live inside something this vast? At around 2 minutes into this part, here's the emotional shift. When reality becomes too big, it can make you feel small, insignificant, lost, like nothing you do really matters. Because how can one life matter in an infinite system? But here's the strange part. That feeling comes from comparing scales. You're comparing your life to the entire structure of reality. And of course, it feels small. But that comparison might not be the right one. At around 4 minutes, here's the deeper realization. Your life is not meant to be measured against the size of the universe. It's meant to be experienced from the inside. Think about it. You don't experience infinity. You experience moments. You don't live across countless universes. You live here, now, one moment at a time. And within that frame, your life is not small. It is everything. Now pause, because this is where perspective shifts. Infinity exists, but you don't have to carry it. You don't have to understand every universe, every possibility, every layer of reality. You only have to live one path, and that makes it manageable. At around 6 minutes, here's the practical truth. Humans have always lived with incomplete understanding. For most of history, we didn't know what the stars were. We didn't know how big the universe is. We didn't know about galaxies or atoms or quantum physics. And yet, life still had meaning. People still made choices, felt emotions, built lives. Meaning was never dependent on knowing everything. And it still isn't. Now let's go deeper, because there's something else happening here. When faced with infinity, you have two choices. You can focus on what you cannot control, or you can focus on what you can. And what you can is surprisingly simple. Your attention, your actions, your perspective. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the promise that brings everything back down to earth. No matter how vast reality becomes, your life is still lived locally. In small moments, small decisions, small experiences. And those are not diminished by the existence of something larger. They are defined by it. Because in an infinite system, every local experience matters. Not because it changes the whole, but because it exists at all. Now return to our 3 questions one last time before the final part. Is there a second universe alongside ours? Yes, and likely many more. Can anything cross between them? Maybe, in ways we're only beginning to understand. And what makes this version of reality, the one you experience? Now the answer feels clearer. It's not about scale. It's about presence. You are here, because this is where your awareness is. And that's enough. Now here's the final turn of this part. What if the purpose of understanding the multiverse is not to make you feel smaller, but to free you from needing the universe to revolve around you? Because once you let go of that idea, something else becomes possible. Curiosity. Instead of needing certainty, you can explore. Instead of needing control, you can participate. Instead of needing to be the center, you can be part of something larger. And that doesn't reduce your importance. It changes the way you define it. Because importance is no longer about being the only one. It's about being aware, present, alive in this moment. And that brings us to the final part of this journey. Because in the end, after all the theories, all the possibilities, all the layers of reality, there's one question left. Not about the universe, but about you. If reality is infinite, if possibilities are endless, if your life is one path among many, then what will you do with it? And whether that question has a final answer, or is simply the one question that matters most. Part 16. The final question. What will you do with this reality? There's a quiet moment after everything we've explored when the questions stop expanding outward and begin turning inward. Not about universes, not about physics, not about infinity, but about you. Because after all the theories, all the possibilities, all the layers of reality, we arrive here. This moment. At around 2 minutes into this final part, here's the shift. The multiverse may be infinite, reality may be layered, possibilities may be endless. But your experience is not. It is finite. You have a limited number of moments, a limited number of choices, a limited window of awareness. And that changes everything. Because infinity doesn't dilute your life, it frames it. Like a single candle in a vast, dark space. The darkness doesn't make the flame weaker. It makes it visible. Now pause, because this is where everything comes together. You don't need to understand the entire multiverse to live meaningfully within it. You don't need to solve the deepest mysteries of reality to experience your life fully. You don't need answers to have purpose. At around 4 minutes, here's the deeper realization. All the questions we asked about other universes, other versions of you, other possibilities, they all lead back to one thing: choice. Not the illusion of control over everything, but the real grounded ability to decide what you do next. Because even if every possible version of you exists, only one version is making this choice. Right now. And that makes this moment uniquely yours. Now let's go deeper, because there's something else hidden in all of this. Awareness. You are aware that you exist. You are aware that reality might be larger than you imagined. You are aware that your life is one path among many, and that awareness is rare. Not because it doesn't exist elsewhere, but because it exists here, in you. At around 6 minutes, here's the most important realization of this entire journey. You are not just part of the universe. You are the part that knows it exists, and that changes everything, because the universe, through you, becomes aware of itself. Not completely, not fully, but partially. In this moment, through your thoughts, your questions, your curiosity. Now pause again, because this is where meaning quietly returns. Not as something imposed from outside, but as something that emerges from experience. Your life matters, not because it is the only one, but because it is lived, because it is felt, because it is experienced from the inside. At around 7.5 minutes, here's the final promise. No matter how many universes exist, no matter how vast reality becomes, this moment is real to you. This experience is real to you. And that is enough. Now let's bring everything together. We asked, is there a second universe alongside ours? And the answer is, very possibly yes. We asked, can anything cross between them? And the answer is, maybe, in subtle and mysterious ways. We asked, what makes this version of reality the one you experience? And now we understand. It is not just physics. It is awareness. It is presence. It is the fact that you are here, experiencing this path. And that leads us to the final question. Not what is the universe, but what will you do in it? Because even in an infinite multiverse, your life is still a story, and you are still the one living it. So what kind of story will it be? One driven by fear or curiosity? One shaped by hesitation or exploration? One spent searching for certainty or embracing wonder? There may be countless versions of you making different choices, but this version is the one that matters to you, because it's the only one you will ever be aware of, and that makes it irreplaceable. So as this journey comes to an end, the mystery doesn't disappear. It deepens, because the universe, or multiverse, is still out there. Vast, uncertain, full of questions. But now, so are you. And maybe that's the connection. Not that you will ever fully understand reality, but that you are part of it. Experiencing it, questioning it, living within it. And that is where meaning begins. If this journey made you pause, even for a moment, and see reality a little differently, take a second to like the video. If you want to explore more mysteries like this, subscribe to the channel. And if there's one question that stayed with you, one idea you can't quite let go of, leave it in the comments. Because the next discovery might begin with a question like yours. And if you think someone else would feel this same sense of wonder, share this video with them. Because sometimes the biggest ideas start with a simple thought. What if reality is bigger than we ever imagined? And maybe This is just the beginning.